Hey, this is a brief tutorial to show you how to use the histogram when you're editing your images. This is in Lightroom 4. The tools here in the Develop module are a little different for Lightroom 3, but the same basic ideas apply. Now, the histogram in Photoshop works a little differently, and so Lightroom is really the good place to be starting your editing workflow anyways. Now, first of all, of course, if you move any of these sliders, it'll change the way the histogram looks, and that's all fine. One of the things that people don't realize is you can actually click and drag within the Lightroom or histogram itself. Now, if you look very closely, when you move your mouse over each section, you can see that it highlights an area of the histogram. And by moving clicking and moving the mouse back and forth when one of those sliders is held up, it changes the way that the histogram moves. So if you do it way over here, it's just going to move the whites primarily. If you do it way over here, it's going to primarily be the shadows. And of course, anytime you move something to the right, it's going to brighten it. If you move it to the left, it's going to darken it. So the way that you should use the histogram when you're editing is, first of all, whether you're doing your edits this way or whether you're doing it this way, or whether you're activating the little tone curve, clicking and moving up within the image or down. And you can see how it's changed it here. You can see how the histogram's changed here. Keeping an eye on your histogram to make sure that you're not clipping anything. Now, even right from the start, you can see how this little triangle here is lit up. That's showing you that I'm losing a little bit of shadow detail. And there's three settings. One is if it's just off, it doesn't show anything. Two, if you click on it, it's on all the time. And then the third one is just, if you mouse over it, then it'll show it up. So when I click it on, you can see down here the little blue overlay that the area without shadow detail here is within the nose. And that's going to be an acceptable thing. Now, if we move the blacks over a bit, obviously, if your picture looked more like this, we're losing a lot of detail here in the nose, the collar, most importantly, the eyes, the ears. That's the kind of thing that you're going to need to fix. And so you can click on your histogram and bring it back over. The other thing you can do, and it's really probably the best way to use this particular tool, if you only have little areas that are selectively too dark, and I'm going to move this back over a little bit, so I'm going to get more or less the look I want in the image overall. So we get a nice contrast, and I think that this white balance is actually not perfect. I'm going to change it to flash because I use studio strobes. So now you can see that I've got a real general sort of look. I'm going to turn this back off, it's distracting. More or less the global edits are good here, but we still have some area that we lose to black here. Clicking on the brush tool, we're going to use the exposure, and we're going to use a positive exposure. Now we're just going to paint in right where we need it. So this is going to be a little bit big of a brush, but I'm going to give it a start that way. And then I'm going to make it smaller. The square bracket keys will change your mouse size either up or down. And you can see just by painting it away, you are getting rid of that clipping overlay. Now this isn't exactly using the histogram, but this is part of the way that the histogram functions. So this is, I call this is certainly related. So we just go ahead and paint that up until you get a nice effect right where you want it. So now you can see we're starting to get some good detail here in the eyes. We can actually see the iris in the pupil separately. This one here was on the fill light side instead of the key, so it's still a little bit darker. We're going to bring that up. We have this little bit of an edge here around the eye that's still got a little clipping. That's certainly fine because you don't need to have a perfect amount of detail on every single part of the image. You just want to make sure that it's the most important parts. So here I'm going to do a little bit more here, the nose. And I also wanted to point out that I've got the feather around 50, and I keep the flow around 50, so 40 to 60, somewhere in that range, and also the density. This is going to help you feather it a little bit. If you move these things all the way up, then what you find is that it gives you a real on and off kind of effect. I'm going to make a new point to make that real clear. So I'm going to turn it way down, and if you paint it, you can see how that's an all-on kind of effect, and that's not going to give you the best sort of edit overall. So we're going to go back and of course get rid of that. Put these back where I like them. And you don't have to be real close. I mean, having it in the right ballpark is a good idea. You don't need to have it so it's like exactly 50% or whatever. Whoops, I'm still on the wrong one. We are going to go back to a plus exposure. Paint this just a little bit more. And then once you get real close, then it's of course important to go ahead and zoom in at 100%, because you really want to make sure that your edits are good. So if you hold down the space key, your cursor turns from the little brush into a little plus, and that's how you can zoom in. So now looking, it looks like we're pretty good here. Holding down the space key and dragging will help you move around through the image. This one here we could probably use a little bit more. And that's how I use Histogram in Lightroom. These tools are going to work pretty much the same whether it's Lightroom 3 or Lightroom 4. The big difference is these 4 changed a little bit from, actually they changed quite a bit from Lightroom 3, but the same basics apply either way. Let me know if you have any questions.